Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Federation flagship Horizon's Edge, watching the stars drift past through the massive viewport. The ship hummed with activity as crew members from a dozen different species worked together. Silani, officers with their blue skin and silver eyes, monitored navigation systems. Vorthan technicians with their tall, thin frames calculated jump coordinates. Krex warriors with their thick armor. Plating stood guard at key positions. Jake had served in the Galactic Federation for 15 years. He had seen wars end and peace treaties signed. He had watched new worlds join the Federation and old conflicts fade into history. In all that time, he had never received a message like the one that appeared on his personal communication device that morning. The message was short and came directly from Earth's High Command. It carried the highest security. Classification possible. Jake read it 3 times before the words truly sank in. Project Departure is now active. All human personnel are to return to human space immediately. No explanations, no delays, effective immediately. Jake stared at the message. Project Departure. He had never heard of it. No explanations, no delays. What could possibly require every human in the galaxy to abandon their posts without warning? Across the bridge, Lieutenant Amy Collins looked up from her communication station. Amy had been monitoring routine traffic between Federation worlds when something strange began happening. Human ships throughout the sector were requesting immediate course changes back to Earth space. "Captain," Amy called out, her voice uncertain. "I'm getting reports of human vessels changing direction across the entire sector. They're all heading toward human territory." Jake felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. The message had been sent to every human in Federation service. Every single one. Admiral Richard Stone was in his office on the Federation, capital world of Nexus Prime, when he received the same message. Richard had spent 30 years climbing the ranks of Federation military command. He was the highest-ranking human officer in the entire Federation fleet. Alien leaders from across the galaxy sought his advice on military matters. Richard read the message twice, then walked to his desk and began typing his resignation letter. He kept it simple and professional. After 3 decades of service, he was leaving immediately for personal reasons. He offered no further explanation. On the research station orbiting Vega 7, Dr. Lisa Grant was in the middle of breakthrough experiments on faster-than-light communication when her personal device chimed. Lisa had dedicated her life to Federation science. Her research teams included the brightest minds from 17 different species. Her work was considered essential to the Federation's technological advancement. Lisa read the message and felt her hands shake slightly. She looked around her laboratory at the alien scientists working beside her. They trusted her. They depended on her guidance and expertise, but the message was clear. No explanations. No delays. Lisa began packing her personal belongings. When her Vorthan assistant asked where she was going, Lisa simply said she had been called back to Earth on urgent family business. She would be gone indefinitely. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human engineers abandoned massive construction projects. Human diplomats walked out of crucial negotiations. Human doctors left their patients in the care of alien colleagues. Human teachers ended their classes mid-lesson and headed for transport stations. The pattern was identical everywhere. Humans simply left. They offered polite but vague explanations about family emergencies or recalled assignments. They did not argue or make demands. They did not express anger or frustration. They just quietly gathered their belongings and departed. Captain Morrison found himself in an impossible position. His orders were clear, but he commanded a Federation vessel with a mixed crew. He could not simply abandon his ship and his non-human crew members in deep space. "Amy," he called to his communications. "Officer, Send a priority message to Federation Command. Request immediate relief for all human personnel aboard Horizon's Edge. Tell them it's a family emergency requiring our immediate return to Earth space. Amy nodded and began transmitting the message. Within hours, a response came back. A relief. Ship would arrive within 2 days to transfer the human crew members home and provide replacement officers for the remaining crew. On worlds throughout the Federation, alien citizens watched in confusion as their human neighbors packed up and left. Human families who had lived on alien worlds for generations suddenly arranged transport back to human space. Human businesses closed their doors. Human-run services shut down without warning. The Zelani, Chancellor Zethka, called an emergency meeting of the Federation Council. Representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss the unprecedented exodus. No one could explain what was happening. Attempts to contact human leadership met with polite but uninformative responses. We regret any inconvenience caused. By the recall of our personnel, came the standard reply from Earth's diplomatic corps. We wish you well in your future endeavors. The alien leaders demanded real answers. They sent diplomatic missions to human space. They offered meetings and negotiations. They asked what demands humans might have that could resolve this crisis. But humans were not making demands. They were not negotiating. They were simply leaving. Dr. Carl Brooks worked in a secure facility deep beneath Earth's surface. He had spent years monitoring galactic communications and analyzing patterns in Federation society. Project Departure had been his idea, based on decades of careful research into humanity's role in galactic civilization. Carl watched the reports flowing in from across the galaxy. The exodus was proceeding exactly as planned. Every human was returning home. Not a single person had refused the recall order or asked for explanations. In his research, Carl had discovered something that most humans did not realize about themselves. Over the past 2 centuries, humans had become the essential workers of galactic civilization. Not the leaders or the decision-makers, but the people who actually made everything work. Humans fixed the problems that other species could not solve. Humans found compromises when alien cultures could not agree. Humans maintained the systems that kept the galaxy running smoothly. And most importantly, humans did this work so quietly and efficiently that other species had stopped noticing it was happening. Now that work was stopping. Every human engineer, diplomat, technician, doctor, teacher, and worker was coming home. For the first time in over 200 years, the galaxy would have to function without human hands holding it together. Carl wondered how long it would take for the other species to realize what they had lost. His research suggested it would not be long at all. The first Federation supply convoy missed its scheduled delivery to the Outer Rim colonies. The reason was simple. The human logistics coordinator, who had planned the route for the past 5 years, was no longer at his post. His alien replacement was still learning the complex calculations required to navigate the dangerous asteroid fields along the route. It was a small delay. Just a few days. But it was the first crack in a system that had run smoothly for decades. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new ship, a human vessel called the Starfire. Through the viewport, he could see the edges of human space. Beyond that boundary lay the galaxy they had served faithfully for over 2 centuries. He wondered what would happen next. 3 months had passed since the humans left. Commander Alex Price stood on the bridge of the human vessel Starfire, watching the long-range sensors display the chaos unfolding beyond human space. He had once been a Federation officer, serving alongside alien crews for over a decade. Now he patrolled the borders of human territory, watching his former colleagues struggle with problems they had never faced before. The first signs of trouble had appeared within weeks of the human exodus. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for decades suddenly became bottlenecks. Ships arrived late at their destinations, or not at all. Cargo manifests contained errors that caused delays at customs checkpoints. What had once been a smooth flow of goods between worlds became a series of costly mistakes and missed connections. Alex watched as a Federation cargo convoy struggled to navigate the Kepler asteroid belt. The route through the asteroids had been mapped by human navigators 50 years ago. They had found the safest path and marked all the dangerous areas. But the alien pilots had never learned to read the subtle signs that indicated unstable rocks or shifting gravitational fields. The lead ship in the convoy scraped against an asteroid that human pilots would have avoided easily. The damage was not serious, but it forced the entire convoy to stop for repairs. What should have been a 3-day journey would now take 2 weeks. On the Zelani homeworld, Chancellor Zethka faced a crisis that was spiraling out of control. 2 of the Republic's outer colonies were fighting over mining rights to a moon that contained rare metals. The dispute had started as a simple disagreement over territorial boundaries. Now it had escalated into armed conflict. For the past century, such disputes had been resolved through the Federation's diplomatic corps. Human negotiators had a reputation for finding creative solutions that satisfied both sides. They understood how to balance competing interests and find common ground between different cultural viewpoints. But the human diplomats were gone. The Yalani negotiators who replaced them followed traditional approaches that had worked within their own culture for thousands of years. They focused on honor and precedent rather than practical solutions. Each side felt that compromise would mean losing face before their people. The conflict grew worse each day. Ships were destroyed. Colonists fled their homes. What had once been a minor territorial dispute was becoming a civil war that threatened to tear the Zelani Republic apart. Dr. Nethkala, a Vorthan scientist, stood in the ruins of Colony Farm 7 on the world of New Harvest. The crops had failed completely. Millions of tons of grain had withered in the fields. The colony's food supply was nearly exhausted, and supply ships from other worlds were delayed due to the transportation problems plaguing the galaxy. The Vorthan had established New Harvest using advanced agricultural techniques developed by human scientists. The farming methods were incredibly efficient, producing 3 times more food per acre than traditional Vorthan agriculture. But the system was also complex, requiring precise timing and careful monitoring of soil conditions, weather patterns, and crop genetics. Dr. Nethkala had tried to replicate the human techniques using only Vorthan knowledge. The Vorthan were masters of calculation and analysis, but they approached problems differently than humans. They focused on mathematical precision rather than the intuitive understanding that human farmers brought to their work. The results had been catastrophic. The carefully balanced ecosystem that human scientists had created was collapsing. Without human expertise to guide them, the Vorthan had made small errors that cascaded into total failure. Now 12 million Vorthan colonists faced starvation. War leader Thakon of the Kreks, warrior clans examined the damaged weapon systems aboard his flagship. The energy cannons that had made Krek ships feared throughout the galaxy were failing. One by one, critical components were burning out faster than they could be replaced. The weapons had been upgraded with human engineering over the past several decades. Human technicians had improved the power systems and made the targeting computers more accurate. They had also simplified the maintenance procedures, making it easier for Krek's warriors to keep their weapons functioning during long campaigns. But the Kreks had never bothered to learn the technical details of these improvements. They were warriors, not engineers. They knew how to fight and how to follow basic maintenance checklists that humans had written for them. When the systems failed in ways not covered by those checklists, they had no idea how to repair them. Thakons Clan was losing battles against enemies they had easily defeated just months before. Other Krex clans were experiencing similar problems. Without effective weapons, the warrior culture that had dominated their society for millennia was crumbling. Desperate clan leaders were beginning to fight each other for control of the few remaining functional ships. On Nexus Prime, the Federation capital, emergency sessions of the Governing Council met daily. Representatives from dozens of species reported similar problems throughout their territories. Economic systems were failing. Infrastructure was breaking down. Social conflicts were escalating into violence. Chancellor Zethka had tried repeatedly to contact human leadership. The responses were always polite but unhelpful. Human representatives expressed sympathy for the Federation's difficulties but offered no assistance. They simply repeated that humanity was focusing on internal matters and wished the Federation well in resolving its challenges. Behind the polite words, alien leaders sensed something they had never associated with humans before: complete indifference. Humans seemed genuinely unconcerned about the chaos spreading through the galaxy. They were not angry or making demands. They simply did not care what happened to their former allies. The realization was disturbing. For over 2 centuries, humans had been reliable partners who could be counted on to help solve problems and maintain stability. Now they acted as if the Federation's troubles were not their concern. Dr. Carl Brooks sat in his secure facility on Earth, monitoring communications from across the galaxy. The data streams flowing into his computers painted a clear picture of accelerating collapse. Supply chains were failing. Governments were losing control. Economic systems built on assumptions of human participation were grinding to a halt. Psychological profiles his team had compiled over decades were proving accurate. Each alien species had developed specialized strengths over thousands of years of evolution. The Zelani were natural politicians and administrators. The Vorthan excelled at complex calculations and systematic analysis. The Krex were unmatched warriors and tacticians, but specialization came with limitations. Each species struggled with problems outside their area of expertise. They had come to rely on humans to fill the gaps in their capabilities. Humans were not the best at any single thing, but they were competent at everything. They could adapt to new situations and find solutions that specialized thinking missed. Now, those solutions were no longer available. Each species was discovering that their great strengths meant nothing when facing problems that required different approaches. Carl watched the reports of failing colonies and escalating conflicts. The galaxy was learning a harsh lesson about interdependence. Systems that seemed stable and self-sufficient were revealing their hidden vulnerabilities. Commander, Price received a priority communication from Federation Command. The message was desperate in tone, offering significant compensation for human technical assistance with critical infrastructure failures. Similar messages were being sent to humans throughout the galaxy. The responses were uniformly polite and negative. Humans expressed regret that they were not available to help. They suggested that the Federation's talented scientists and engineers would certainly find solutions to their current challenges. They wished their former colleagues success in their endeavors. Alex deleted the message and returned to monitoring the sensor displays. Beyond human space, the galaxy continued its descent into chaos. But that was no longer humanity's problem to solve. 1 year after the humans left, the galaxy was dying. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck of the human research vessel Discovery, reading the latest intelligence reports from beyond human space. The numbers told a story of complete civilization collapse that was almost too terrible to believe. The proud Zelani Republic had shattered into 47 separate city-states, each fighting the others for dwindling resources. The elegant blue-skinned people who had once governed vast sectors of space now struggled to maintain order within single planets. Their sophisticated political systems had crumbled without human mediators to resolve the endless disputes between competing factions. The Vorthan colonies were experiencing mass starvation. 17 worlds had already been abandoned as their populations fled to the overcrowded homeworld. The tall, analytical people who had mastered mathematics and logic found themselves helpless against agricultural failures they could not calculate their way out of. Their perfect equations meant nothing when crops refused to grow. The Kreks, warrior clans, had turned on each other with savage fury. Without external enemies to fight, they had declared war on their own kind. Their mighty fleets, crippled by weapon, failures and maintenance problems, limped through space seeking battles that would prove their honor. Half their ships were now floating hulks, abandoned when critical systems failed beyond their ability to repair. Lieutenant Amy Collins sat at her communication station aboard Discovery, monitoring the desperate transmissions flooding subspace channels. Every day brought new pleas for assistance from across the galaxy. Former allies begged for human intervention. They offered everything they possessed in exchange for help. The Zelani Chancellor, now calling himself Supreme Leader of the Eastern Territories, had transmitted an offer of 100 star systems in exchange for human diplomatic assistance. The Vorthan Science Council promised to share their most advanced technologies if humans would send agricultural experts to save their remaining colonies. The Kreks war chiefs offered to serve as human vassals if human engineers would repair their fleets. Amy had orders to acknowledge receipt of these messages, but provide no other response. The standard reply was always the same brief statement: "We thank you for your communication and wish you success in resolving your current challenges." The truth behind the collapse was becoming clear to anyone who bothered to look. Dr. Lisa Grant worked in a secure laboratory deep within human space, analyzing the psychological and sociological data that had been collected over centuries of cooperation with alien species. The patterns were obvious once you knew what to look for. Humans had not been equal partners in the galactic community. They had been the maintenance crew for an entire civilization. While alien species focused on their traditional strengths and cultural values, humans had quietly taken responsibility for everything else. They had become the universal problem solvers, filling every gap that specialized alien thinking could not address. The evidence was overwhelming. Human engineers had designed the safety systems that kept alien space stations from exploding. Human doctors had developed the medical procedures that prevented alien diseases from becoming epidemics. Human teachers had created the educational programs that helped alien children learn skills their own cultures could not provide. Most importantly, humans had learned to think like each alien species when necessary. When dealing with Zelani political crises, humans had adopted Zelani concepts of honor and tradition. When solving Vorthan technical problems, humans had used mathematical approaches that Vorthan minds could understand. When working with Kreks military forces, humans had framed solutions in terms of warrior codes and battle tactics. The alien species had never learned to think like humans in return. They had seen human adaptability as a useful tool rather than a fundamental skill they needed to develop themselves. Now that the tool was gone, they were discovering how dependent they had become on human flexibility and problem-solving abilities. Commander Alex Price received an urgent transmission from the Federation Emergency Council. The message was marked with the highest priority codes and came directly from the former Supreme Chancellor, who was now barely controlling a single planet after the Zelani Republic's collapse. The transmission was a formal surrender. The Federation was officially disbanding. All member species were withdrawing to their home territories to focus on their own survival. The carefully constructed alliance that had governed the galaxy for over 3 centuries was ending not with war or revolution, but with simple admission of failure. But the real crisis was just beginning. Deep in space, the artificial sun that powered Nexus Prime was showing signs of dangerous instability. The massive fusion reactor had been built over 200 years ago, using a combination of technologies from a dozen different species. It had been maintained by human engineers for the past century, who had gradually improved its efficiency and safety systems. The non-human technicians, who had taken over the facility after the human exodus, were discovering that they did not understand how their predecessors had kept the reactor stable. The control systems used human-designed interfaces that required intuitive understanding of how the different alien technologies worked together. The maintenance procedures relied on human experience with similar systems rather than rigid technical manuals. Warning lights flashed red across the reactor control room as the artificial sun began to flicker. Radiation levels spiked beyond safe parameters. The gravity generators that kept the station in proper orbit started experiencing power fluctuations. 9 billion inhabitants of the Nexus Prime system faced extinction if the reactor failed completely. Doctor Carl Brooks stood before the human high command in the secure chambers beneath Earth's surface. The leaders of humanity had gathered to hear his final report on Project Departure. Representatives from every human world and colony attended the meeting either in person or through secure communication links. The results exceed our projections. Carl reported, "Galactic civilization has collapsed in every measurable category. Economic systems are failing. Governments are fragmenting. Military forces are ineffective. Scientific research has nearly stopped. Social order is breaking down on hundreds of worlds." The room was silent as the full scope of the catastrophe sank in. Humanity had proven its point more dramatically than anyone had expected. Their withdrawal from galactic affairs had not caused minor disruptions or temporary inconveniences. It had triggered the complete collapse of interstellar civilization. Admiral Richard Stone, now serving as Earth's defense commander, stood to address the assembly. "We have received over 10,000 requests for assistance in the past month alone. Former allies are offering us anything we want in exchange for help. They finally understand what they lost when we left." The question now was what humanity would do with this knowledge. They had the power to save the galaxy or let it continue its descent into darkness. The choice would define the future of countless species and determine whether the stars would know peace or endless war. At the edge of human space, monitoring stations detected a small fleet of alien vessels approaching the border. The ships flew under a white flag of truce and carried the most desperate delegation the galaxy had ever assembled. Former enemies had joined together in a final attempt to save their dying civilizations. The aliens were no longer coming as proud Federation representatives demanding answers. They were coming as broken refugees, begging for mercy from the species they had granted for far too long. The alien delegation arrived at Haven's Gate Station on the edge of human space like broken refugees rather than proud galactic leaders. Admiral Richard Stone watched through the observation windows as their damaged ships limped into the docking bays. Once these vessels had been symbols of power and advanced technology. Now they were barely functional, held together with emergency repairs and desperation. Former Chancellor Zethka led the group that assembled in the station's main conference room. The blue-skinned Zelani leader looked decades older than when Stone had last seen him. His elegant robes were worn and patched. His silver eyes, once bright with confidence, now showed only exhaustion and fear. Beside him stood Dr. Nethkala of the Vorthen, her tall frame bent with weariness. War leader Thokgon of the Krex had come without his ceremonial armor, wearing only simple clothing that marked him as a supplicant rather than a warrior. Representatives from dozens of other species filled the room, each one showing the marks of the past year's disasters. Stone entered the room and took his seat across from the delegation. He wore the simple uniform of Earth Defense Command, with no decorations or symbols of rank beyond his admiral's insignia. The contrast with the desperate aliens could not have been starker. He appeared calm, rested, and completely in control. "We come to beg for your help," Sethka said without preamble. The words came hard to the former chancellor, who had once commanded respect from hundreds of worlds. "Our civilizations are dying. Our people are suffering. We know now what we lost when your people left us." Stone nodded politely, but said nothing. The silence stretched uncomfortably as the aliens waited for a response that did not come. Finally, Dr. Nethkala spoke up. "The artificial sun powering Nexus Prime is failing," she said, her voice shaking. 9 billion people will die if we cannot stabilize the reactor. Our best scientists have tried everything they know, but the systems were modified by human engineers. We cannot understand how to repair them. That is unfortunate, Stone replied. Calmly, I am sure your people will find a solution. The casual dismissal hit the aliens like a physical blow. Thakgon stepped forward, his warrior instincts overriding diplomatic protocol. You cannot simply let billions die, he growled. Humans always claimed value life above all else. Was that a lie? Stone's expression did not change. We offered partnership for over 2 centuries, he said. You preferred to treat us as useful servants. When we became tired of being taken for granted, we chose to leave rather than continue. That relationship. He stood and walked to the large viewport that showed the star field beyond human space. In the distance, the aliens could see the lights of human ships patrolling their borders. Those vessels looked well-maintained and fully functional, a sharp contrast to the failing fleets throughout the rest of the galaxy. You came here expecting negotiations, Stone continued. You thought we would make demands that you could agree to or bargain with, but you misunderstand our position. We are not angry with you. We do not seek revenge or domination. We are simply no longer interested in solving your problems for you. Zethka felt his legs grow weak. The human admiral was describing something worse than conquest or punishment. He was describing complete indifference to their fate. What would it take? The former chancellor whispered. What could we offer that would convince you to help us? Stone turned back to face the delegation. Nothing you could offer would restore the old system, he said. The Federation is dead. The idea that humans exist to fix everyone else's mistakes died with it. If you want our help, it must be on completely new terms. He activated a holographic display that showed a detailed plan for galactic restructuring. The aliens studied the document with growing amazement and horror. The humans were proposing the complete reorganization of interstellar society. No more federation, Stone explained. No more assumption that humans will handle whatever problems other species cannot solve. True partnership means that every species takes responsibility for their own affairs and contributes equally to shared projects. The terms were harsh but fair. Each species would govern its own territory without interference. Trade would be conducted through carefully negotiated agreements, rather than human-managed systems. Scientific research would require genuine collaboration rather than human experts leading alien assistance. Military conflicts would be resolved through direct negotiation rather than human mediation. Most importantly, humans would share their knowledge and techniques, but other species would be required to learn and master these skills themselves. No more relying on human problem-solving to handle difficult situations. No more taking human adaptability for granted. And if we refuse these terms? Dr. Nethkala asked. Then you are free to continue as you have for the past year, Stone replied. We wish you success in your endeavors. The aliens looked at each other with desperation. They knew their civilizations could not survive without human assistance. But accepting these terms would mean admitting that they had been completely dependent on human capabilities for centuries. Thakgon was the first to speak. My people accept, he said. The Krex clans will learn to maintain our own ships and weapons. We will no longer expect humans to solve our technical problems. One by one, the other species agreed to the new arrangement. They had no choice. The alternative was the complete collapse of galactic civilization and the death of billions of their people. Stone activated his communication system and contacted the human relief fleet waiting at the edge of Nexus Prime. You are authorized to begin reactor stabilization procedures, he told Captain Jake Morrison. The evacuation ships will not be needed. Jake acknowledged the order and led his fleet toward the dying artificial sun. The human engineering teams aboard his ships carried the knowledge and equipment needed to save Nexus Prime. But this would be the last time humans rescued the galaxy from its own incompetence. The repair operation took 3 weeks. Human technicians worked alongside alien engineers, teaching them the principles behind the reactor's operation. Every procedure was carefully documented. Every technique was explained in detail. The aliens were required to learn and understand rather than simply watch humans work. When the artificial sun blazed back to life, it marked more than just the saving of 9 billion lives. It marked the beginning of a new era in galactic relations. 5 years later, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the human flagship Sovereign Dawn, watching a mixed crew work together with genuine mutual respect. The alien officers had learned to handle complex problems on their own. They no longer expected humans to provide all the answers or fix all the mistakes. Dr. Lisa Grant worked in her laboratory alongside scientists from 12 different species. They were collaborating on breakthrough research into quantum communication, with each team contributing their unique strengths to the project. The work proceeded slowly because no single species carried the entire burden. But the results were more innovative than anything achieved under the old system. The galaxy had been forced to learn a painful lesson about taking essential workers for granted. The trembling that began when humans walked away had shaken the foundations of civilization itself. But from the collapse, something stronger had emerged. True partnership could only exist between equals. And sometimes the only way to achieve equality was to walk away from those who refused to recognize your worth. The universe had trembled when humanity left, but it had emerged from that trembling more balanced and more just than ever before.